Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, I want absolutely everything added to the calendar. Sure thing, boss. Supervisor introduces a new project management tool to the team. Our team is only 3 people and we don't need a giant professional software solution. Both of us underlings point this out. Supervisor insists. We worry about it being a waste of time. Supervisor says it will be worth it. We ask for clarification about what exactly do we need to enter into the new tool. Supervisor says, everything. Everything? Absolutely everything you do should be entered and checked off. Coworker underling gets a gleam in his eye. I understand. So we enter everything into the calendar. Leave home for work? Entered. Arrive at work? Entered. Sit down at desk? Entered. And so on. And every time we accomplish a task, we log on to the program and mark it as complete. Coffee? Check. Write an email? Check. And every time we do this, the program automatically sends an email to supervisor that the task is done. To supervisor's credit, he took it well and laughed about the overwhelming emails. And it was only a few days later that he dropped the program and we went back to the way it was before. The next story is titled, Everyone Must Join a Work Call Regardless of Working Hours? Sure. A company I worked for is global, offices all over the globe. It wasn't often, but it was expected that if you were needed on a call outside of your business hours, you'd make arrangements to join, typically a crazy one-off scenario where they needed to find an urgent time slot for a single call. It sounds awful, but it really was infrequent and most folks were very conscientious when planning meetings. In comes a crappy meeting leader, we'll call her Karen, based in Europe, who scheduled a weekly reoccurring call at what would be 4 a.m. for West Coast USA. I was East Coast, so 7 a.m. for me wasn't bad, but I reminded the meeting leader that the meeting made for the next day was outside their hours. She said they'd see the meeting in their afternoon and be able to accept for the next day. It was especially selfish because there were 8 participants from West Coast and Karen was the only one in Europe. Next day, no one from West Coast joined. Karen made a big stink about it to management that they all have to join weekly for this call. Sadly it worked and those poor souls had to join at 4 a.m. every Friday. Within only 2 to 3 weeks someone from West Coast became very interested and offered to champion the project and become the leader. Karen was happy to relinquish leadership and be a participant only. That very same day they took over the project. The reoccurring meeting was moved to normal business hours, afternoon West Coast time, evening Europe time. Karen was not happy and in the first occurrence kept making remarks about how it's very late Friday evening for her whenever she'd answer a question. My brain is a bit fried because it's late evening here, but let's not drag this topic out any further, as happy hour here has already started, haha. On the 3rd week of the rescheduled call she stopped joining even though her participation was key, being the only representative from Europe. The new leader had to go to management to get her to join, and when I dropped off the project they were still meeting Fridays. I hope she learned her lesson. The next story is titled, Include me in all conferences moving forward. Me, all conferences? I used to work as the only conference facilitator in a preventive services program with 2 units, 4 case planners each. At the time, I would schedule all necessary conferences with the case planners in Outlook. Supervisors were required to participate in some of the conferences, depending on the purpose, and I would invite them to those. After a few months, one of the units was assigned a new supervisor. On her first day, she approached me and asked to be invited to all conferences for her unit. I asked if she knew that supervisors did not have to participate in all conferences and informed her which conferences she needed to be a part of. She responded that she still wanted to be included in all conferences moving forward. Since it was her first day, we hadn't gotten a chance to talk about how I did my job. She didn't know that I periodically planned all conferences ahead of time for all case planners, and was often fully booked for the upcoming week or 2. It turned out that on the day she asked, her unit was scheduled for conferences with me every day, with at least 1 or 2 each day, for the next 2 weeks. After she asked to be added to the email invite, I included her on all of the conferences for her unit. The next day, she came by my desk and told me it wouldn't be necessary for me to invite her to all conferences, and just invite her to those she is required to attend. I did as was asked, but had a laugh to myself after she left. The next story is titled, How I Tricked My Entitled Cousin into Eternally Cleaning the Backyard. So, I have this cousin, let's call him Nick, and he is incredibly entitled. But this is the story of how I finally got revenge on him. This happened before the lockdown, but I didn't use Reddit then, so here we are. Nick and my nice cousin, let's call her Elle, came over to watch movies and weird cartoons. Note, we are all 13 to 15 years old, and a few hours later my mother called me to help her clean the backyard. We have many plants, a pool and a wooden deck. I headed over and Elle offered some help. Now, Nick always wants to be the best. Nothing is ever enough. So I assume he thought that being a boy, the nicest thing he could do was offer help as well, because boys don't do chores. So he did. Little did he know, as soon as he said that, I already had a plan. Then, my mother saw the three of us and decided to separate the chores. Nick was going to water the plants, Elle was going to clean the deck, and I was going to clean the exterior chairs and stuff. Perfect. At one point, my mother left to get us snacks, perfectly predictable, and as soon as she left, Nick finished watering the plants, also predictable. He came to me and tried to look like he was willing to help, asking me what should he do next. I stood up and showed him a part of the floor near a grass patch and told him how this spot was always dirty. I said that he had done enough and he could rest after cleaning that. What happened next was a mixture of predictable, satisfying and funny. He had the garden hose in his hand, he used it to water the plants, and used it to try to clean that spot. The dirty part was directly in front of the grass patch, and the water hit the grass and a lot of dirt, mud and water flew and got the floor even more dirty than before. He said done. Elle started laughing as she noticed my plan and I just pointed at the floor. He looked and his eyes went wide to see the floor even more dirty. He tried to clean with the hose again and failed miserably. Elle and I sat down and enjoyed the show. After 10 minutes of fun, my mother came back with the snacks and tried not to laugh as she explained to Nick how we tricked him. He was furious and tried to slap me. 1 hour later, my aunt came and was told what happened. Nick got grounded for trying to hit his cousin and, my favorite part, for being dumb. The next story is titled, I Don't Need Your Help. Okay. GLHF. A few years ago, I accepted a contract to write some material for an engineering class. The result was a set of heavily hyperlinked LaTeX documents that compiled into a single PDF of a few hundred pages, with a nice table of contents, embedded images, and carefully written equations in both breakout and inline with text. I was contacted by a student who's been given a short-term contract to convert the LaTeX to HTML so the class can go online. Only two small problems. Problem number 1, student doesn't know LaTeX. Problem number 2, student doesn't know HTML. I suggested that the easiest solution, particularly within a short time frame, would be to use an online tool to convert the LaTeX to HTML, preserving the original structure and hyperlinks of the document set, and using a JS plugin to render the native LaTeX equations. I offered to volunteer some time to make sure it went okay. To the extent that edits or new material were required, the easiest solution would be to edit the LaTeX, which student can learn quite easily. Nope. Student didn't want to do any of that. Student has a plan. 1. Import entire PDF rendered from LaTeX into Adobe Acrobat. 2. Use Adobe Acrobat to convert content to Word. 3. Edit content in Word. 4. Manually screenshot every equation in the PDF, and drop screenshots into place in the Word document. 5. Use Word to automatically render the HTML for a website. I politely suggested that the plan has some issues. The document structure will be lost, Word is gonna vomit out a single slab of HTML corresponding to the monolithic PDF input. Equations will be mangled. Embedded images will be rescaled 9 different ways, resulting in major quality loss. It's okay. Student is confident. No further help required. Malicious compliance, not helping. Not my circus, not my monkeys. The content was pristine when I handed it off, and I have a record of the conversation. The next story is titled, Notate the Account Thoroughly? You got it. I work at a call center for health insurance. One of the things that people really seem to get mad about is when we tell them we can't do something because it would break HIPAA, which is federal privacy law that specifically protects health and medical information. So, a few days ago, a gent calls in on behalf of a provider's office, provider in this case meaning doctor, wanting to check eligibility and benefits for a patient. He gives me the NPI, National Provider Identifier, number for the practice, and per HIPAA and all my training, I ask him to verify the address in the system. He gives me an address that is decidedly not the one in the system, and when I politely explain that, he says he doesn't know any other address. So I told him that because we couldn't properly verify him, we're required to verify the following 3 things for a doctor's office or facility: NPI or tax ID number, name of the practice, facility, individual provider, and address as it appears in the system. I couldn't give specific benefits for a patient, but I could give general plan information. Gentleman just kept sitting on the phone line, demanding specifics, while I kept patiently explaining why I couldn't do that. He finally goes off on me, telling me that he's been doing this for years and he knows he can do it, and to transfer him to my supervisor and make it quick. A little irked at that particular demand, because a transfer takes more than a few seconds to set up these days due to working from home, I politely said that I would need a minute or 2 at least to set it up and put a note in the system. Provider rep says, yes, please put a nice long note in the system. IIMOTHERDUCKER. Into the transfer notes went the following. The name of the caller, the NPI number used the request to speak to a SUP, why he requested a SUP, the address he gave that wasn't in the system, what he had initially requested, what I offered to give him, what I had explained to him about why I couldn't do as he asked, his admission that he didn't know the address in the system. We have room for 4,000 characters in the transfer notes. I used all but 25 of them. I transferred him, and took more calls, but got curious during my break and took a look to see what happened. Noted onto the account were multiple notes, from multiple supervisors, that he was unable to be verified and that we couldn't give him the requested info as explained to him by the initial rep. WHO took his call. The final SUP note said that he was requesting a call back from someone higher than that SUP, but that he got mad and hung up before giving them his number after the SUP requested a minute to get the callback note together. So, as a result of him telling me to put a long note in the system, he got none of the information he requested, he got nobody who would break HIPAA for him, and he is getting 0 callbacks because he refused to be patient and wait for the request to be completed properly. Don't ask call center reps to break HIPAA, folks. We will rat you out to the other reps, and you will get 0 of what you requested. The next story is titled, It's All Hands On. My daughter told me this story after spending the weekend at her cousin's house. The last morning there, her uncle's girlfriend was making breakfast. Once everything was done, and almost everything was set out for people to eat, she went to make herself a plate. She noticed that there was nothing to scoop the food onto the plate with, so she asked, "Where are the forks?" Her uncle's girlfriend told her, "It's all hands on." Meaning help get stuff out for breakfast. My daughter, being their smart aleck she is, took this instruction literally, so she went over to the eggs and grabbed a handful and plopped it onto her plate with a smile on her face. Her uncle's girlfriend looks at her for a moment, doubles over laughing and said, "That's not what I meant." My daughter looked at with a big ole grin on her face and told her, "But that's what ya said." My daughter thinks she was hilarious. I kinda agree. The next story is titled, Got to Skip the Line at the Airport. Backstory. My wife and I went on vacation to Hotel del Coronado, in Coronado, Southern California. The vacation was awesome and we live in Iowa, so the beach was nice to see. One issue about living in Iowa is for some reason or another it takes almost a full year for new car models to start showing up on dealer lots. The Prius Prime had just come out and I was interested because I hate wasting money on gas unless it's for fun like off-roading. We caught an Uber and went to the Toyota dealership to see the cars. The plan was I could buy a car and drive it back instead of taking the plane, and according to my math I would only have to fill the gas tank about 10 times if I plotted my route to use charging stations. I love to drive and we went on a fun though chaotic test drive. Midwest driving is far more relaxed than California driving. In the end the car was out of our budget, but even though it a Prius and would look goofy next to my jacked up Jeep, I absolutely love that car. We didn't buy it though. We left the dealership and finished the vacation. When we got to the San Diego airport and the counter asked for my government-issued identification. I pulled out my wallet and realized it was gone. I had left it at the dealership. Us being from Iowa and being very pro-Second Amendment had our carry permits. I paused for a moment knowing we had gone to a few gun shops in San Diego just to see the crazy nonsense Californians voted into existence. Also knowing California hates guns and I was considering using a gun license to board an airplane. Side note. We went to a gun shop and saw a guy talking to the clerk rather angrily because they wouldn't sell him a gun. The reason they were unable to sell him a gun was because he had his medical marijuana license and thus violated federal law regarding addiction to illegal drugs. I jokingly said to move out of California, buy a real gun and he will be better off. The store clerk laughed and asked where we were from. We said Iowa and I started sharing some pictures from my collection. Back to the story. I explain about the car and driver's license. The worker doesn't care and says without government-issued identification I can't fly. Cue the malicious compliance. I pull out my weapons permit and slide it across the counter. The airport worker looks at it and groaned. They tell me to step aside and that I'll have to go to secondary. My wife didn't want to get separated and when asked for identification also uses her weapons permit. We get an escort away from the counters and a golf cart is flagged down for us. The worker explains to the driver and off we go. We blasted past the lines all the way through the airport and over to a larger security checkpoint with no lines and a mix of cops, TSA and guys in nice suits. We are escorted to this checkpoint and are searched vigorously. They try to x-ray my pillow and ask why I'm carrying my pillow. It's a 10 pounds Tempur-Pedic pillow with cooling gel and the 50 pounds bag limit forced me to carry it. Apparently so thick they couldn't see through it. They squished, flattened, shook and even took what looked like a rolling pin to it and cleared it. Next was our carry-on bags. Our bags we used for travel are the same bags we used to go to the range. They swab my bag and the machine goes nuts. It came up positive for gunpowder and tannerite. I explained that this is my go bag and I use it at the range. They go over this bag like it was going to explode at any moment. They clear me and set me aside after putting me through an imaging machine multiple times. My wife goes through the same thing but the imaging machine keeps going off. They have her empty her pockets again and I break down laughing. In her pocket was her driver's license the entire time, she just didn't want to get separated and pocketed it at the first counter. Anyway, it was her bra clasp. We get cleared and go to the next step. The golf cart with the very old man returns and takes us to our gate. We are told where to sit and to wait. Our tickets are economy class and we are in group 3 so don't expect to load up for a while. We were surprised once again when we are escorted to our new seats up in the very front of the plane. We are told to use the call button for anything we need and to inform staff if we plan on leaving our seats. Another man introduced himself as Homeland Security and sat across the aisle from us. I asked if he counts as staff because I needed to use the restroom. He said yes to use the one up front. The flight, food and entire trip back was amazing and halfway through I was told to stop asking to go to the restroom or asking for permission to complete every little action such as stand in the aisle to stretch. We finished our trip and truly recommend using a weapons permit if you ever feel like traveling by air though results may vary. The next story is titled, I Should Do My Job. Okay. I got my first job at 16 working in a ski resort's restaurant in the kitchens. I was a line cook. That was my job, but on busy days I'd help bring out food just to keep the plate area clean enough to put more up. This wasn't a particularly busy day, but the meal I put up wasn't getting taken out and I couldn't see the waitress. After 5 minutes I made sure that the only 2 items from my side of the line were the only ones on the ticket and went out to deliver the plates before they got cold. I approached the table with my best smile and chirpy voice and set down the chicken tenders and fries and a Caesar salad in front of a Karen and her child. Karen, what is this? You're not our waitress. Me, I understand and apologize for the surprise. I just wanted to make sure your food wasn't cold before it got to you. Karen, unacceptable. Kitchen staff shouldn't come out of the kitchen. You should do your job. Take this back, it's probably filthy. I looked at the kid who was about to dig into his golden fries before his basket was swept away from his mother and shoved back into my hands. He looked surprised then like he was about to cry as Karen shooed me away back to the kitchen. I went back dumbfounded, but the customer is always right, right? Guess I'll stick to my job in the kitchen. The kid was crying and Karen just gave him a few quarters to play the cheap arcade games we have in the pit before going to her phone. The waitress wasn't coming back, but I had to do my job, right? My job was in the kitchen. Maybe 30 minutes had passed and the Karen looked impatient with her kid nowhere to be seen. I assumed he was still in the pit playing games, so I went in the back and took the small set of stairs down to the pit. Kitchens were connected. We had a main floor kitchen, upstairs kitchen, bar, and the pit bar. I left through the pit bar and saw the kid sitting around bored because he spent all his quarters on games. I gave him a fresh basket of chicken tenders and fries because why should the child suffer because of a horrible mother? I even got him a nice caffeinated pop to then hopefully make his mother suffer throughout the rest of the day with a hyper child. The rest of the hour went by and still no sign of the waitress. The line cooks were getting worried, and as I was getting out to go look for her, the Karen walked out with a child who was bouncing off the walls. I found the waitress in the bathroom who was so sick she had been puking for the past hour. Her paws were starting to get a little red from blood because of THW's simple force of vomiting for that long. Somehow no one knew she was there until I went in. She was sent home and the manager ended up waiting tables for the rest of the shift. I kinda wish the story was more exciting, but malicious compliance with a Karen? Honestly, if I could just piss of entitled people like her all the time, I'd gladly work in customer service for a long time. The next story is titled Noise Complaints While Working Midnights at the Big Box Store with Orange Aprons. Neighbors got a heavy dose of heavy metal. 15 odd years ago, I worked midnights in the outside garden department at the store with the Orange Aprons. There was a condo complex that was built behind the store after the store had been there for many years. As a result, there was a rule that we were unable to run lift equipment outside the gate after midnight, or else cops would be called and the store would be ticketed with a noise complaint. On a couple of busy nights, I found myself outside the gate after midnight and one of the neighbors called the cops. The store was issued a ticket and I was given a warning. On more occasions, the cops were called while I was working within the outside garden department and the cops couldn't give a ticket because I was within the store. Quite malicious compliance. I had a kick-ass stereo at home and a CD collection of heavy metal. After one of the invalid noise complaints, I brought in my stereo, cranked it to 11 and loaded up the 5-disc tray with Slayer, Cannibal Corpse, Cradle of Filth, Marduk, and Decapitated. I rocked out for the next week. Cops were called 3 straight days. But, because my stereo was within the store, there was nothing they could do but ask me to turn it down. My fun was taken away from me when my store manager told me to stop making enemies. The stereo stayed, but my music was played at a much more respectful level. The next story is titled, You Never Do Anything Nice for Me. B equals brother. Me equals me. So me and my twin brother were swimming with some friends and we decide we are gonna have a pool noodle fight, so we get out of the pool and grab some pool noodles and walk to our backyard. I proceed to start obliterating him, dodging and weaving and slicing, and he starts getting angry. He starts furiously attacking me with his pool noodle, but I was still beating him. Then he got mad. Really mad. He storms toward me with a look of anger in his eyes. I could tell soon he was gonna actually punch me, so I said, "Him getting bored, him gonna stop." He doesn't stop. I walk out of our backyard and back to the pool while he is still attacking me, closer to where my mum is sitting because we weren't allowed to fight near her, and I get in the pool. Later he gets angry at me for him floating in my way while I was swimming laps, and he starts yelling at me about how I'm a terrible person and never do anything nice for him. That's when the malicious compliance comes in. I decide that I won't do anything nice for him for a while, because apparently all the nice things that I do for him aren't actually nice, like picking up his socks off the floor, doing the dishes when it's his turn, cause HES busy playing Minecraft, and a bunch of other things I don't feel like typing out. So now HES pissed cause him not doing anything for him. This just happened yesterday, so I'll try to keep you updated if anyone cares. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.